I want to take you on a journey for a second. Imagine that you travel to completely isolated rural Ireland. The air is incredibly damp and it's carrying this biting, chilling wind that just seems to seep right into your bones. Now, you're carrying a heavy, deeply personal burden, your parents' ashes. And your plan is to scatter them at the very hotel where they spent their honeymoon. Sounds somewhat peaceful, right? But the absolute second you arrive, the atmosphere is entirely suffocating. There's this faint, rotting smell in the air that you just can't quite place. You ask the staff to see the exact suite your parents stayed in, only to be bluntly told that it's been bolted shut for years. And why? Because it's supposedly haunted by an ancient witch. Okay, let's dive into this. We are fully exploring the labyrinthine nightmare of the film Hokum. Let me be clear. This isn't just your standard ghost story filled with cheap jump scares. Oh, no. It's a profound psychological descent into trauma, ancient folklore, and those insidious quiet ghosts we carry inside of us long before we ever step foot inside a haunted house. Now, consider this agonizing premise for a moment. Imagine a woman who recently saved your actual life suddenly goes completely missing in this eerie, middle-of-nowhere hotel. The police? They're asking unhelpful questions. The locals are acting incredibly bizarre, almost like they're hiding something. And realistically, there is only one place left to look. So I have to ask, would you break into a locked, genuinely haunted suite just to find her? What exactly is hiding behind that rotting, heavy oak door? And how does it intimately connect to a dark, deeply buried secret past that you've been desperately trying to drink away for years? This central mystery is the absolute beating heart of our cinematic breakdown today. We are going to unlock that heavy door step by step, peeling back the terrifying layers of this puzzle together. To really grasp the horror here, we first need to understand our protagonist, M. Bowman. And honestly, M is such a fascinating, deliberate choice for a name. You see, M is actually the scientific symbol for electrical resistance, which perfectly, beautifully captures his constant, abrasive friction with everyone and everything in the world around him. When we first meet him, he is heavily intoxicated, just aggressively tapping away at his laptop in a dimly lit room. He's writing this remarkably bleak novel about a Spanish conquistador and a young boy wandering through an unforgiving, scorching desert. They stumble upon a water skin, a glass bottle buried in the sand, but the cork is hopelessly stuck. And then, in a moment of pure, shocking brutality, the conquistador realizes the only solid thing he can smash the bottle against to open it is the young boy's skull. It's an incredibly dark, violently visceral image, and as we'll see, it's literally the master key to unlocking M's entire fractured psyche. But you know what's really fascinating? It's what happens before M ever even packs his bags for Ireland. The true dread begins right there in his messy living room. Before he even finishes typing out that grim desert scene, this creeping, heavy silence fills the space. He hears a subtle noise, he looks up and catches the terrifying, dark silhouette of a woman standing in his home. When he turns around, a spooky, spectral woman is standing right next to him, literally close enough to touch. He blinks, his breath catches in his throat, and poof, she's gone. Immediately after this terrifying encounter, he opens up a dusty cardboard box filled with his family's old belongings. So the absolutely crucial point we need to understand is this. M is fundamentally haunted long before he ever reaches that cursed hotel. His true haunting comes from a deep-seated internal guilt. Because that ghost he sees in his apartment, that's his mother. He is quite literally carrying his ghosts with him on his back, dragging them all the way across the world to Ireland. The moment M arrives at the hotel in rural Ireland, the environment is immediately and profoundly hostile. It's like the land itself rejects him. Right off the bat, he meets this massive, intimidating man named Fergal, who is just casually standing next to a bleeding goat he's just slaughtered with a crossbow. Yeah, quite the welcome. Soon after, M stumbles upon a terrifying, deeply weathered old man who is aggressively scaring two young children with some hyper-violent local folklore. This old man tells them all about an ancient witch who shackles weary travelers, puts them under her dark spell, and basically drags them on an eternal tour of the underworld. And he paints a horrific mental picture, specifically mentioning how she absolutely loves to capture little boys, tear off the pieces that matter most to them, and let them slowly bleed out in the dark. To make matters even weirder, M ventures into the damp woods to scatter his parents' ashes by a massive redwood tree and crosses paths with Jerry. Jerry is a local guy who lives totally off the grid, and he spends his days constantly drinking hallucinogenic magic mushrooms mixed with raw goat's milk. So the stage is flawlessly set. We've got a cast of deeply broken, incredibly strange, and dangerously unpredictable men. Amidst all this encroaching darkness, M meets Fiona, who is a genuinely kind, highly observant hotel worker. M actually confides in her about his bleak book. And then, casually, almost numbly, he reveals the core trauma that completely ruined his life. His mother was murdered. She was shot when he was just a child. This singular event instantly turned his father into a monstrous, abusive drunk, who eventually just drank himself into an early grave. But the real tragedy here is that M himself has grown up to become a mean, cruel drunk. Just to give you an idea of how toxic he is, in a moment of sheer spite, he brutally burns the hand of a young bellboy named Albie with a piping hot spoon, literally just to make the kid go away. It's a sickening symptom of the disease he inherited from his dad. So totally overwhelmed by his own raging toxicity and suffocating guilt, M attempts to take his own life in his dreary hotel room. But Fiona, acting on pure, desperate intuition, bursts through the door and actually saves him. M wakes up later in the sterile, bright light of a hospital. But when he rushes back to the hotel to apologize and thank her, he learns the unthinkable. Fiona vanished into thin air right after the hotel's Halloween party. It's incredibly jarring. I mean, she was his sole lifeline in this nightmare, and now she is just gone. Driven by an absolutely obsessive guilt and this desperate, gnawing need to find the woman who just saved his life, M finally does it. He breaks into the infamous locked honeymoon suite, and the room itself is wow. It's a rotting relic, completely untouched by time, radiating this suffocating aura of dread. The wallpaper is peeling off in strips, the air is thick with decades of dust, and the silence in there is absolutely deafening. Drunk off his metallic flask, M just collapses and passes out on the massive four-poster bed. As he sleeps, the film aggressively rips away his emotional defenses, and a shocking, deeply repressed memory is finally revealed to us in this jarring flashback. We see a young child playing with a heavy, fully loaded revolver. It accidentally goes off with a deafening crack exactly as his mother walks into the room. So M wasn't just a tragic bystander. Actually, scratch that. It's so much worse. M accidentally shot his own mother as a child. In that traumatic flashback, this twisted, incredibly creepy children's TV character called the Donkey Man is playing on the screen in the background. And as M tosses and turns in the haunted suite, that very same horrifying Donkey Man literally manifests in the real world, standing silently over him in the suffocating dark. Suddenly, M is violently jolted awake by Mal, the hotel manager who is in an absolute panic upon finding M trespassing in the forbidden room. Mal frantically insists they have to leave immediately, no questions asked. But M's eyes catch on something, an old wooden dumbwaiter. You know, one of those small freight elevators used for delivering food from the kitchen? Out of pure curiosity, M presses the rusted button to call it up from the basement. Well, Mal is absolutely terrified by this simple action. He locks M inside the suite, leaving him trapped, and just bolts. As the dumbwaiter slowly, agonizingly creaks its way up the pitch-black shaft, the tension is just unbearable. You can literally hear the old ropes groaning under the weight. When those small wooden doors finally slide open, M violently recoils. He finds Fiona's dead body stuffed inside the tiny wooden box, still wearing her Halloween costume. He frantically searches her and discovers his own voice recorder hidden in her pocket. Fiona used it in her final terrifying moments to expose the ugly, horrific truth. She was pregnant with Mal's child. Mal, terrified that his own wife would discover the affair, heavily drugged Fiona, stuffed her unconscious body into the dumbwaiter, and sent her down into the sealed pitch-black basement to die completely alone. So now, Emma's hopelessly locked in this rotting suite with absolutely no way out through the main door. The only possible exit is that very same dumbwaiter that leads straight down into the pitch-black abyss of the basement. But Fiona's recording offers a chilling, terrifying warning. There is no button to call the lift back up from the bottom. Once you go down into the dark, you are trapped down there forever. Knowing this, M devises a frantic, incredibly tense MacGyver-esque plan. He spots an antique clock in the room that features a little mechanical boy who swings a golf club every hour on the dot. M carefully positions the heavy clock so that when the next hour strikes, the mechanical golf club will physically hit the dumbwaiter's up button. After setting his trap, he respectfully and tearfully moves Fiona's body, physically folding himself into the tiny claustrophobic wooden box that literally reeks of death, and he begins to slowly descend into the suffocating dark. Okay, I want you to really vividly picture this basement. It is an absolute masterclass in sensory horror. M steps out of the tiny box into a long, rotting dirt hallway, lit only by a few sputtering, flickering lanterns. There are these eerie trinkets stolen from decades of past hotel guests just hanging by thin threads from the ceiling. He explores, desperate to find an exit, but he only finds a damp dead end. And then he hears it. Deep in the suffocating darkness, this low, agonizing wailing sound begins. Then, the rhythmic, heavy, metallic sound. Clank, scrape, clank. It's the sound of solid iron shackles dragging across the stone floor. The witch is down there with him. The ragged breathing and guttural cackling get closer and closer in the pitch black. The horrific story that the old man told the children, it wasn't just spooky local folklore. The monster is incredibly, terrifyingly real, and she is actively hunting him in the dark. Just as the witch's twisted, horrific form lunges toward him from the shadows, the hour finally strikes upstairs. The mechanical golf boy clock hits the button, and the lift violently jerks, ripping M back up the shaft just in the nick of time. But when he looks down in sheer terror, the witch is unnaturally scaling the walls of the elevator shaft. She's literally crawling up the brickwork right behind him like an insect. M scrambles out onto the floor of the honeymoon suite. Remembering this dense folklore book Fiona had shown him earlier, he frantically grabs a piece of chalk he found downstairs and draws a large protective circle around the bed. He cowers inside of it just as the witch violently breaches the room, her heavy shackles clanging against the floorboards. But bound by the ancient, unbreakable rules of folklore, she absolutely cannot cross that chalk line. She simply stands there, mere inches away, silently peering at him through the delicate bed curtains with these hollow, dead eyes until dawn finally breaks. When morning finally arrives, the psychological horror explodes into absolute physical chaos. Jerry, the woodsman, realizes Em is trapped upstairs and bravely tries to save him. But Mal, completely desperate to cover up his gruesome murder, shoots Jerry dead with a crossbow. To destroy the evidence, Mal frantically sets the entire hotel on fire. However, when Mal attempts to escape the raging inferno via the main service lift, he realizes a fatal error. He needs the master key, which is currently hanging on a hook way down in the basement. But here's where things get incredible. M has undergone a profound psychological shift. He isn't just running in terror anymore. Making a highly calculated, sacrificial play, M has already taken the dumbwaiter back down, actively dragging the master key with him into the dark. He forces a deadly, high-stakes standoff. If Mao wants to escape the raging fire consuming the hotel above, he has absolutely no choice but to go down into the witch's lair to retrieve the key from M. This perfectly calculated move leads us to an incredibly powerful, somber, emotional peak. Mal comes down into the basement, and the furious witch instantly attacks from the shadows, violently clamping her heavy iron shackles around both men's ankles. Murr is forced to sit on the cold dirt floor, securely shackled, completely unable to finish drawing his protective chalk circle. The end seems absolutely certain. But in this moment of utter, crushing despair, the ghost of his mother appears to him one last time. She kneels down and just hugs him. Murr completely breaks down. The years of armored cynicism and rage just melt away. He sobs, "It was an accident, I'm sorry." She gently strokes his head and replies, "I know. You can't stay here." She touches his chest, and when she vanishes back into the dark, Murr miraculously finds a small handsaw sitting right in his coat pocket. Driven by a completely newfound will to live, he violently saws off his own foot shackles, freeing himself just as Mal is screaming, being violently dragged through a supernatural doorway into the literal underworld by unseen howling beasts. By the skin of his teeth, M manages to escape the burning building just in time, and he later wakes up in a sterile hospital bed, having been rescued from heavy smoke inhalation. But just when we as the audience think the nightmare is completely over, the film throws us a massive head-spinning narrative curveball. Albie, the young bellboy whose hand M burned with the spoon, comes to visit him. And Albie confesses something truly shocking. He says that on the night M burned him, Albie took his revenge by spiking M's drinking flask with a massive, potent dose of Jerry's hallucinogenic magic mushrooms. This revelation completely pulls the rug out from under us and forces us to ask a massive reality-altering question. Was any of this actually real? Was M just heavily hallucinating the ghosts, the terrifying witch, and the entire descent into the underworld this whole time while he was passed out drunk in a rotting room? Okay, let me explain the brilliant, incredibly subtle visual cipher the filmmakers hid right in plain sight to answer this exact question. Earlier in the story, if you remember, Jerry mentioned that the local goats often eat the magic mushrooms growing wild in the woods. He said that when the goats are high, they love to climb up onto parked cars and just stare endlessly at their own reflections in the paint. Now, this isn't just a quirky little character detail. The philosophical metaphor here is profound. When you are under the heavy influence of this specific hallucinogen, it forces you to look inward. It actively strips away your ego and forces you to stare directly at your own reflection, confronting your deepest, most terrifying inner demons. It essentially gives your subconscious a physical, living form. So, the absolutely crucial point is how this profound metaphor perfectly applies to our protagonist. M wears thick glasses throughout the entire film. If we look very, very closely at the reflections in M's glasses during the climax, we can actually decode the reality of the entire movie. When M is staring at the terrifying donkey man, his glasses only reflect scrambled TV static. This brilliantly confirms that the donkey man is a pure hallucination. It's a physical manifestation of M's internal rotting guilt over accidentally shooting his mother while that specific TV show played in the background. But when M is cornered by the witch in the basement, she casts a clear, physical, moving reflection in his lenses. The guilt is entirely in his head, sure, but the witch, oh no, the witch is 100% real. What makes this survival so poignant is a real-world parallel concerning the film's actual production. The director of the film, Damon McCarthy, noted that in the original draft of the script, M never actually made it out of the basement. He was supposed to die down there in the dark with Maul. But the director eventually realized that ending was simply too bleak, too devastating to leave the audience with. So he made the call to rewrite it. And this beautifully, perfectly mirrors M's own journey within the story itself. M is a broken author who writes bleak, hopeless endings for his characters because he feels his own life is just a bleak, hopeless tragedy. But by surviving this horrifying ordeal, by facing his guilt and saving himself, he earns the right to rewrite his own story's ending. When we decode the deep symbolism of M's novel, it actually explains absolutely everything about his character arc. Let's break it down. The violent conquistador represents M's father, and the disease of unrestrained anger and profound unhealed grief. The vulnerable young boy? That is M himself. The water skin, or the bottle, represents alcoholism. Just as the conquistador wanted to smash the bottle on the boy's head to get it open, M's father took his unbearable grief over his wife's tragic death and completely weaponized it. He passed his destructive generational disease of alcoholism down onto his son like a cursed inheritance, nearly destroying M in the process. But after successfully escaping the witch, surviving the blazing fire, and finally facing his mother's ghost to gain absolution, M sits down in the quiet, peaceful hospital room and he rewrites his book's epilogue. In this new, highly emotionally charged ending, the conquistador doesn't bludgeon the boy. Instead, he simply hands the boy the bottle and offers his own head, essentially accepting his guilt. But the young boy refuses the violence. He takes the bottle and with a sense of profound reverence, he throws it far away into the desert sand. He then embraces the conquistador, both of them crying together in the red dust. This is the absolute emotional climax of M's internal journey. It deeply symbolizes M finally forgiving his father, and infinitely more importantly, finally forgiving himself. He is actively breaking the generational cycle of trauma and finally, mercifully, putting the bottle down. In the final lingering shot of his written story, we see that discarded bottle resting in the sand right next to a half-buried ram's skull. Now, while a skull usually signifies death and decay in most media, in the specific visual language established very early in this film by Jerry the Woodsman, the skull in the desert is intended as a profound symbol of hope and radical transformation. It represents the shedding of the past. Maul willingly went down into the underworld as a haunted, monstrous drunk who actively hurt people, and he emerged from the ashes as a healed, transformed survivor. Let's tie this entire cinematic analysis together, because it really is brilliant. Hokum is ultimately a masterful, grueling exploration of how men process guilt and trauma, particularly regarding the women in their lives. We see three distinctly destructive paths on display here. M accidentally killed his mother and copes by actively destroying himself with alcohol. Jerry killed his terminally ill wife to lovingly end her medical suffering, but he copes by retreating entirely into the woods and consuming hallucinogens to permanently escape reality. And Mal? He cold-bloodedly murdered Fiona just to protect his own reputation, feeling an absolute chilling lack of guilt, replacing any remorse with ruthless self-preservation. All three of these tragic, broken paths inevitably collide in a hotel that physically manifests their punishment. Which brings us to our final, lingering thought for today. M's journey from a hostile, bitter drunk who casually burns a child with a spoon to a man who literally risks his own life to solve a woman's murder and faces chained demons in the dark just to find peace is staggering. By looking inward, facing the static of his own crushing guilt, and drawing a hard line in the chalk against his inner demons, he survives. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. When we carry heavy ghosts of our own making, are we entirely destined to pass that haunting on to the next generation? Or do we have the strength to throw the bottle into the sand and finally rewrite the ending?